And now, without further ado, let's have a conversation with our artists. First, we'll be chatting with Jenny-Lynn Hall about her exhibition, Diary. And I'm going to start, Jenny-Lynn, by pulling up some images to share with everyone.
Sounds good.
All right. All right. Jenny-Lynn, I'm curious, when did you start working with fresco?
Well, I moved to Italy in 1996 to study mosaic. And a couple of years after that, I met a woman who's also a mosaic artist, Grazia Lombardi, and she introduced me to this plaster technique. It isn't actually fresco. It's a lime-based plaster that I actually paint onto when it's dry. Fresco, you work into the color into when it's wet. So this material was designed to be a flooring material, and we first started working as installers, just doing layers of the same plaster for flooring, bathrooms. We did a lot of staircases because it's only 3 millimeters thick, so you don't really have to change the height of the floors. But then we got really intrigued about experimenting with the different effects we could get. And she was really interested in texture, and etching, and I was more interested in painting. So between the two of us, we developed this really rich collaboration of just what the possibilities of this medium were. And at the time, they were pretty much on-site experimentations that we were doing. But when I moved back to the US, I started working on cement board. And so just that made it more of an art object, and they became more like paintings. And so now I make my own plaster and adjust the color of it and the texture, depending on what effect I want to get, and work on cement board. And so, and it's much more, I use it really like a painting medium.
All right.
So, yeah. So quite a while, actually, I've been using this. And what I like about it is that there's always room for experimentation.
Did you want to ask Jenny-Lynn anything, Marie-Luise?
Yeah, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the title of the show and the title of the pieces and how that ties, how the title ties into the work.
Sure. So the show's called Diary, and it has a subtitle of 18 Days. And I started it when I was on a retreat last January, which seems like an age ago. But the idea was that I would journal about the same place that I went to every day. And when I was talking to one of my friends about it, he said, well, why don't you call it 18 days? And that actually makes more sense, because a diary sort of implies that it goes on longer than a set period of time. But anyway, so I added that afterwards because I already had submitted diary for publicity. But they're just titled Day 1, Day 2, Day 3, Day 4, etc. So that's really how the naming evolved.
So your work, it seems like it's an expression of a passing of time. How was that experience for you?
Well, I started the project knowing that I was going to make paintings from it. So I would take notes I went down to the beach. These are all seascapes. And so I would go down to the beach every day and make notes of the color of the sky and of the ocean. And with the intention, I intentionally didn't paint the colors, I just made notes. And so I knew that when I got back in my studio, I would make paintings from those notes. And the theme really is about how you can look at the same thing every day or every minute, and it changes. So that's what I was trying to express in this series, just how time is continually going on, and there are these minute changes that construct it. The horizon line represents continuity, so they all, I drew a red line through all of them, and some in this one you can sort of see it. But the horizon line isn't exactly the same spot in all these paintings. And so the idea is that the time advances in a linear fashion, and then all the changes that make up every moment are represented in the colors on the top and the bottom.
I'm gonna, sorry, pardon me. I'm gonna just step out of the share for a second because I don't think I have all the images. So I'm
Okay.
gonna fix that. Did you want to ask a question, Marie-Luise?
Yeah, so I'm curious, kind of along the lines of what you were just talking about, the concept of the passing of time versus the work that you made from it. Which one came first? Like, did you think about that concept of time first and then make the work, or did they evolve together? Or can you talk a little bit more about that?
I was interested in the concept first, which isn't usually, often I work the other way. But I was really interested in, it was a Zen retreat, so there was a lot about being present in the moment and just observing, observing and being involved with what's going on in every moment. And so it really came out of that philosophy. And they did, so the concept, I came up with the idea and then figured out the methodology at the same time, but the pieces were done much later in my studio. Okay. So it was definitely a planned series.
Jenny-Lynn.
Yes.
Hi, it's Ellen. Jenny-Lynn, did you make a distinction when you made your red line in your paintings, in your artwork, between the sky inspiring you or the ocean, or did you make it a purposeful distinction between the two?
Well, the color relationships change incredibly. So I was really interested in that. So there were some days where there was hardly any distinction at all between the color of the ocean and the color of the sky. In fact, I think day one is it's black and white, and there really isn't much distinction. Let's see, day 11 actually. And that actually fascinated me also, how sometimes the sky is darker and sometimes the ocean is darker, and just depending on the light. Because you would think these are pretty much taken at the notes were taken at about the same time of day, and just the conditions were different every single day.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Lynn?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Great to see you.
Lovely to see you too, darling.
All right, well, shall we go ahead and open up to more questions? I see Carol. Carol, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, great. Well, hi, Jenny-Lynn and all. So a couple of things. If you lined up all the entire series, day 1 through 18, is there a thread of those days? So for instance, does it capture different times of the day? Is it sequenced in any way? I mean, you think of like Monet's haystacks, right? It's different, the same exact period of time, or or different. And is there any relationship between the that's my first question, relationship between those days and the time? And then also, after you took your notes, did you take a photograph and then paint against the photograph and your memory, or not?
So they were not exactly at the same time of day. They were generally in the afternoon, but the range of hours was probably about 3 hours. So it tended to be late afternoon, although sometimes it was more important. The ritual of going to the ocean every day and I tried to get the time more or less the same. And I didn't take photographs. Part of the idea was that I was going to make the series from notes and from my memory. So the paintings are pretty interpretive. And so when you see the whole series, it's pretty colorful series actually. And so I really exaggerated some of the colors, and that was kind of fun to do. So it's not, it's not completely accurate, but it's based on my notes.
Very nice. Thank you.
All right, Diana, you have a question?
Hi,
Oh,
Jenny-Lynn.
hey,
Have you
Diana.
have you done a lot of etching and printmaking at all?
I took an etching course when I was studying. I went to the Academy of Fine Arts in Italy, and part of the required program was etching. So I did actually just a year of etching, but that is about it.
And was
And
that
sometimes
like,
I have a Dremel tool, and so sometimes I do etch into my plaster work.
okay, because that has a very, very etching-like quality. Your work to me does. It looks like they were prints or monotypes. And I was curious also, like, did you do a lot of rubbing of the inks, or not the inks, no, the pigment powders or whatever you use? Did you rub them a lot?
Not in this, actually. This in these, the plaster is saturated by pretty inky glazes,
I see.
for the most part.
I just have this feeling of like that you've been touching them a lot, but I guess that's kind of like not really accurate, other than how you applied the plaster.
Yeah, it's not. There's not a lot of handwork actually,
Yeah.
and it's mostly done with a trowel, and then you're just letting the colors really get absorbed into the plaster. They're done in different layers, and then I like to think of it as controlled chance. So I cannot, I can't control how it's absorbed exactly, but I can add more pigment in certain areas, or the plaster is opaque and the pigment glazes that I make are translucent. So it's a play with those two things.
Very satisfying to look at the work.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Did you get to see it in person?
Yes, and I think it is beautifully installed in the annex.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought it was held in the space just really exquisitely. Like it really, really well represented your work the way you installed it in that space. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I was initially I was going to make. I started with much bigger pieces, 5 by 3 feet, and so the idea was to go into the space and be completely evolved by this horizon and everything. And then I realized that it really would have been too big, and that the images actually had to be more intimate. So I did make them a quarter smaller than they were supposed to be, and I think it works better for that space.
Yeah, it does. It pulls you in, and then it's very intimate.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Very nice. Any more questions for Jenny-Lynn? Well, I have a question, Jenny-Lynn. I'm curious, when did you join Grow, and what made you really want to join Gallery Route 1?
Let me see. I joined, gosh, about 17 months ago. No, more than that, 18 months ago. And what I really liked was both the possibility to have solo shows. I like that format as a collective member, but really that there's a lot of community service involved with Gallery Route 1. I really like the Artists in the Schools program, and I just like the idea that all these things work together. There are some things that when I was introduced to art projects at an early age in elementary school, they just had a huge impact on my life. And I just think letting kids experiment with materials and with creativity and making projects is just really important. So those are the main reasons. I like that combination of community service and freedom in the visual arts, which I think is really important too.
Thank you, Jenny-Lynn. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shelley.
You're welcome. And next, we're going to be looking at the work of Marie-Luise Klotz. Welcome, Marie-Luise.
Thank you, Shelley.
And I'm going to go ahead and pull up your work. And pop it into slideshow. There we are. All right. And one of the things that I think I'm not alone in being curious about is the combination in your exhibition of photographs and drawings. And so just curious how those integrate for you.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I have worked primarily in photography for a really long time, though I did, when I was younger, do a lot more drawings. And so there's an element to my work that is very like the concept of connected earth and how trees are connected through the root system, that there's only so much you can do with photography. Because you can't really show what's going on underground. So the drawings allowed me to be more imaginative and think about how those interconnections might look like. And so that's where the drawings, I felt like, yeah, really allowed me to think about what those connections look like. And also it really kind of started with the beginning of the pandemic, where I had a lot more time on my hands in the evenings. And so I just had more calm and time to think about the project, and brought out my pencil and paper and started drawing those. So it really kind of almost became this ritual during COVID times.
I'm just, if you could address the two images that are shown right now and the relationship, that would be really cool.
Yeah, so one thing I was doing is photographing. I try to spend a lot of time outdoors, and I photograph a lot. So whether I'm in the mountains or I see different cloudscapes, and what I was looking for is patterns in those different landscapes and try and find ways to put them together. So on the left, there's a ridge line, which I photographed in Yosemite, and on the right, there's like clouds, which is actually photographed from the Berkeley Hills. And I was trying to look for these lines to bring those images together. So a lot of the photographs are paired together in different ways. So if you do get a chance to see the exhibition, you'll see that. And yeah, here's one of the drawings that's kind of thinking about the different root systems and connections and everything.
Cool.
So what was it like at the exhibition? There's photos that are taken all over the world, and so I was just wondering about that. How it relates to the title and how.
So I travel a lot. I'm from Germany. I lived in California for the last 10 years. I also lived in Montana as a kid, where I live again now. And so those three locations, I've kind of always been bouncing around, and I photograph kind of wherever I go. And so, and I also, of course, not now, but in general, I really like to travel a lot. And I'm constantly, wherever I'm traveling to, kind of viewing the world photographically through whatever project I'm working on. And so there were a lot of photos taken really all over the place for this project. And I feel like where it really ties together is because the title of this work is Connected Earth, and thinking about how nature is deeply connected and how humans are deeply connected. And the interesting thing is that because the images are taken all over the world, really, like you can see those same patterns wherever you go, all over the place. And so I like that it kind of ties in, like in pairing, like this one, on the right, we have a whale skull, and on the left, there's some rocks. I think those rocks were taken in New Zealand. And so really like tying in those connections in nature and all over the world, and just like you can see the patterns kind of wherever you go. So yeah, that's kind of it's not obvious when you look at the images, but they really are taken kind of all over the world.
How did the relationship of the quotes to the work develop for you?
So I often, when I start a project, I usually start it if I learn something interesting, like a new scientific concept or some form of research. And I started this project by learning about how trees are connected and communicate with each other through the root system. And then what I do is I read a lot about that subject. So there was one book I read, for example, called The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wohlleben. He's a German author, coincidentally. But so I read a lot about something and then I make the work based on that. And as powerful as photography is, there comes a point where there are certain more intellectual concepts that are really hard to communicate through a photograph. And I found that if I go back to some of the books I've read and some of the things that I've learned along the way, if I pull quotes from that and integrate them into the exhibition, that kind of helps guide the viewer and helps, it almost builds like this structure within the work, within which the work can be viewed. And so that's kind of not unique to this project. I've been doing that for a while, where I kind of like pull that more brainy information and bring it in, because yeah, it just really helps to communicate some of the concepts. Yeah.
Nice.
In the show, there are a couple of photographs that use artificial light. You were mentioning when you were installing it, they were lit by a flashlight. At night you lit parts of trees.
Mm-hmm.
I was just curious about that technique.
Yeah, it's really fun. So it's called light brushing. And it's almost a form of painting. So you set up a tripod, and Shelley, I think one of the images is at the end of this, but set up a tripod and it's a longer exposure, and you kind of just take a flashlight and paint on your object, paint on your tree, and you can illuminate certain parts. And so that's why it's called light brushing, because you're like painting with the light.
I'm
Yeah.
trying to advance to the
Oh yeah,
image.
sorry. I didn't mean to rush you. Yeah, it's a very fun technique. Yeah, there you go. Because you can really manipulate the way a tree is lit without having any fancy equipment, just like a flashlight. And for the most part, I really use whatever natural light is around, but there are some images like this one that use that light brushing technique.
When did you first become interested in photography?
So I've been interested in photography for as long as I can remember, to be honest. I very specifically remember getting my first camera. And it was a very exciting day. And then I took a photography class in high school, and that really solidified it for me. I think I just kind of decided I wanted to be a photographer. And I think what I really enjoy about the medium is that I just really love all the beauty in the world, and photography lets me hold on to that. Whether like, yeah, some moments like how the light hits the clouds or a mountain, photography lets me hold on to that. And I can photograph and capture something the way I see it and share it with others. So, but it's really like, yeah, almost a tool to hold on to the beauty and my lens of how I see the world. Yeah.
Nice. Well, why don't we open up to questions for our viewing audience. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing here. And
I think I see a question in the chat, actually.
Too. Dottie wants to know, did you have any problems with using endangered species, such as the whale skull, in your work? I wanted to do a project on endangered species and was told that even if they are already dead, like butterflies, it is illegal.
Oh, interesting. I did not have any problems with that because I tend to, well, the whale skull I found on a beach and I didn't really remove it. I was just photographing it where it was, so I wasn't breaking any rules in that sense. I don't really carry out dead animals or dead insects or anything. If I do bring things home, it's like pieces of bark or maybe some little rocks or something. And I'm honestly not sure what the legality studies on that, but yeah, I've never had any problems with the endangered species, but it is in theory, yeah, I try to not carry out too many things.
All right. Anyone else have a question for Marie-Luise? Yes, Diana.
So the photograph that you showed of the piece with how you painted with the flashlight, it looks so surreal. You know, and with the way the stars came out, that's just like, was that really how it was?
Yeah, I feel it's so much fun to do those, because every time, like, you know, let's say the exposure is for 20 seconds or something, and it's different every time, like even if you think you're moving the flashlight in the same way. And yeah, you're right. And I think there's all these different light colors going on, and yeah, it's really fun. But I'm glad you think it's surreal. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it looks like a painting or something that you fabricated almost.
Yeah, well, I guess it is fabricated in terms of the light aspect. Yeah, but other than that, I didn't. Other than the flashlight, everything is completely natural. I didn't really mess with that photo much.
Have you done any more since your move like that?
What's that?
Have you done any more like that since you've moved?
Not yet, but I'm looking forward to that, because I have. Yeah.
Yeah, those night skies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Carol, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I thought your work was really beautiful, and I was just curious. In this exhibit, it's about the environment, but in your entire body, have you ever photographed people and or architecture, or is your entire focus on what represented by what we saw today?
Well, thank you. I pretty much, for the most part, it's based in like nature and environmental art. When I was younger, I photographed some people and architecture, but I realized more and more that I really prefer to just be by myself and in nature. And I really find that art and photography is a way for me to express my concern for the environment, and like kind of see art as activism or a way to think about things more deeply. So I really primarily focus on the environment. Yeah. Nature.
Are you generally by yourself when you are photographing these?
I'm sorry, am I by myself?
Mm-hmm.
It depends. It's honestly often I might be backpacking, I might be hiking, I might be with other people. Sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. It really depends. Yeah.
What I thought was really intriguing is your combination, your pairings.
Oh, thank you.
And seeing the lines, but they were
Mhm.
entirely different. You know, I think it was, now I don't remember, but I think that was the whale skull and the rock, the
Mhm.
granite, and to combine that, it was really beautiful.
Thank you. That was really fun, because like once you start looking for those patterns, you can see them everywhere. And I actually had a hard time. Like there were some that worked really well with more than one combination and like kind of settling on one. So I think it's in the next exhibition I might pair them differently. But yeah, there's once you start seeing those lines, they get really prominent.
I'm going to call on you, Alice, in just a sec. I have a question from the chat from Gayanne. She says, did you study and work with old-fashioned film when you began, or did you start with digital?
I got to work with old-fashioned film, and I'm so grateful for that. Yeah, I was like right on the cusp. That photography class I took in high school, that was old-fashioned film. Even when I went to college and undergrad, we did some large format film stuff, and so it was right. I was kind of like learned the traditional method and then transitioned into digital. So I feel like that's actually really important in terms of understanding some of the technical aspects of it. So I'm really glad I had that.
All right, Alice.
I wanted to pick up on something that Carol brought up about how the exhibit came together. So I was curious about your journey from like beginning this series to the point where you had a body of work that you were ready to present, and then how you chose which pieces made it into the exhibit and which pieces you had to exclude. Like, I wonder if there are pieces that you really loved that didn't find a home in like the final collection based on your parameters.
That's a really good question. Also, hi. So yeah, the evolution is interesting because it started with thinking about how trees are connected. And I thought, well, this is going to be a body of work about how trees are connected and how trees communicate. And then I was kind of independently of that, photographing clouds and ridge lines and waterways. And then I suddenly realized in this like big aha moment how those things are connected. Like all the different patterns I was seeing in nature. And then I realized how that's connected to the trees. So it was like this slow process of kind of just like following my intuition and just photographing and just making the work, and then suddenly realizing how they all come together. In terms of picking pieces, that is the hardest thing for me to do as an artist. There are definitely pieces where I'm like, I love this combination. I want it to be in there, but it just didn't find a home, whether it's because of the sequencing wasn't right. So that basically was a process of the smaller images. I had them all printed out all over my table, finding different combinations. And it was like this endless elimination, inclusion process. And there were even some images where I'm like, I thought, well, this is definitely going to go in. And then when it came to installation, I realized, well, it just can't. So it's kind of very much just as I go, figuring it out. And I think like in a different iteration, different installation, different images might be included. So I kind of just very much go by whatever feels right in the moment, and whatever wants to be seen. Yeah.
It was interesting watching you install the show.
Oh, yeah.
At least just trying out different things and different relationships between the photos.
Right, you got to see that live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was really like a creative process. The installation was important, and it evolved. And
Right. Yeah, because it always depends on the space you're in too, and how that's laid out. And yeah.
Was that the first time you've been in the center gallery?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, because it's tricky balancing what that space is.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions out there? We have a comment and a question from Amber. Especially since you've already paired images and went through the work of thinking about sequencing, do you have any plans for a book project?
Yes. Yes. I absolutely want to make a book. If anyone knows my past work, there's usually a book that goes along with my exhibitions. This time around, I just didn't have the time or the brain space, but I would love to make a book. And the beautiful thing there is that I could include more of the sequences and more of the combinations. So that is something on my mind. Yeah.
All right. Anybody else? So I'll ask Marie-Luise, when did you join Gallery Route 1? And I know you're off on a new adventure now, moving away from us, but how long have you been a member and what brought you in?
So I've been a member for about 3 years. I actually, I had an exhibition at Gallery Route 1 with another member, Xander, in 2014. That was for a juried call. And that's when I was first introduced to the gallery. And then a few years later in 2017, I was the emerging fellow at the gallery, where you, as a fellow, you're basically a member of the gallery for 1 year. And you have an exhibition at the end of that. And after I became a fellow, I then became a member. And that was in, yeah, I think 2017. And it's been really absolutely incredible to be part of that community, like the gallery, just have a space that's completely run by artists. Is incredibly special. And yeah, I did just move back to Montana, so I have to begrudgingly withdraw my membership. But yeah, so the yeah, I guess that answers that question.
All right, thank you so much, Marie-Luise.
Thank you.
And unless there are any other questions, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap this up today. All right.
It's nice
And
to see everybody like this. It's
yeah,
I mean, it's really very close feeling of dialoguing together.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining. It's really nice to see everyone.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you for having us.
Alice made the comment, I love the contrast between the two artists. Thank you for that, Alice. And let's see, I guess I'll go ahead and do this. And Dottie says thank you. And I will thank everyone so much for joining us today. These exhibitions, along with She Inspires Me, which are black and white portraits by members of our Latino photography project, will be up through December 6th. So please visit in person to see these wonderful works. The gallery will be open from Thursday to Sunday, 11 to 5. And if you were moved by today's presentation and want to support the work that Gallery Route 1 does, bring art to the community, then please visit our website and make a donation today. And when you do, note in the comments that it was because of Artist Conversations. And thanks again for coming, and we hope to see you again at another Artist Conversation.